Michael Chen woke up that Saturday morning feeling pretty good about himself. The sun was shining, the weather was perfect, and he'd finally decided to clear out all the stuff cluttering his garage. 3 months had passed since he moved into this quiet suburban neighborhood, and he still had boxes of things he didn't need anymore. Old furniture, kitchen appliances he never used, books he'd read twice already, and a bunch of random household items that just took up space. He'd checked the HOA rules online the week before, and it clearly said residents could hold up to 2 garage sales per year. No permit needed, just keep it reasonable and clean up afterward. Simple enough. So that morning he dragged everything out to his driveway, set up a few folding tables and made some signs with prices. Nothing fancy, just a regular garage sale like millions of people do every weekend. The first few hours went great. His neighbor from 2 houses down, an older gentleman named Bill, stopped by and bought a lamp for $5. They chatted about the weather and how the neighborhood was nice and quiet. A young couple with a baby bought some picture frames and a coffee maker. Michael even sold his old exercise bike to a teenager whose mom was thrilled to find something under $50. Everyone was friendly and he was actually enjoying himself. It felt good to meet people from the neighborhood and make a little money at the same time. Around noon, just as Michael was thinking about taking a lunch break, a silver luxury SUV pulled up to the curb. The engine was still running when the driver's door swung open, and out stepped a woman who looked like she meant business. She was probably in her mid-50s, wearing expensive-looking workout clothes and designer sunglasses, even though the sun wasn't that bright. Her hair was styled perfectly, not a strand out of place, and she carried herself like someone who was used to being in charge. Michael smiled and waved. "Hi there. Feel free to take a look around. Everything's priced, but I'm open to reasonable offers." The woman didn't smile back. She walked straight up to his driveway with her phone already out, taking pictures of his tables, his items, and even his house number. Michael's smile faded a bit. That was weird. "Excuse me," she said, her voice sharp and authoritative. "Do you have a permit for this?" Michael blinked. "A permit? No, the HOA rules say we can have 2 garage sales a year without a permit. I checked before I am the HOA," she interrupted, practically spitting the words. "I'm Patricia Hendricks, president of the Meadowbrook HOA board, and I don't recall approving any garage sale at this address." Michael kept his voice calm and polite. "Well, according to the bylaws on the community website, individual approval isn't required. It says residents can hold up to 2 sales annually as long as they're on Saturday or Sunday and we clean up the same day." Patricia's jaw tightened. She took more photos, getting uncomfortably close to his belongings and even photographing his garage interior. The rules are more complicated than that. There are procedures, notifications, standards. She picked up one of his items, a perfectly good toaster, and wrinkled her nose like it was garbage, and certainly standards about what can be sold. "This looks like junk." "It all works fine," Michael said, trying to keep the irritation out of his voice. "Is there a specific problem I can address?" "The problem," Patricia said, turning to face him fully, "is that people like you move into our community and think you can just do whatever you want. This is a quality neighborhood. We have standards, property values to maintain." The way she said people like you made something uncomfortable settle in Michael's stomach. "I'm just having a garage sale," he said carefully. "Same as people do in neighborhoods everywhere." Patricia jabbed a finger toward his tables. "You're creating traffic. You're creating noise. You're turning the street into a flea market." Michael glanced around. There was one car parked on the curb, hers. The street was quiet. He'd sold maybe 20 items all morning, but he decided not to argue. "I'll make sure to keep things tidy and quiet," he said. "And I'll be done by 4, well before sunset." "Oh, you'll be done much sooner than that if I have anything to say about it." Patricia pulled out her phone and started typing furiously. "I'm documenting all of this. The board will be hearing about your little stunt here, trust me. You can expect a formal complaint." "Ma'am, I really don't think—" "I don't care what you think," she snapped. "I've been running this HOA for 8 years. 8 years! And I know every single rule, every regulation, every clause. What I see here is a clear violation, and violations come with fines. Substantial fines." A car pulled up then, a young family looking interested in the items on display. Patricia shot them a look that could freeze fire, and they hesitated. Michael smiled at them encouragingly. "Please take a look around," he called out. Patricia moved closer to Michael and lowered her voice, but the threat in it was crystal clear. You will receive official documentation of your violations by Monday morning. I suggest you use the weekend to familiarize yourself with how things actually work in this community. We don't tolerate people who think they're above the rules. I'm not trying to be above anything, Michael said, his patience starting to wear thin. I'm trying to follow the rules as they're written. The rules as I interpret them, Patricia corrected him. That's how HOAs work. The board has discretion and I am the board president. What I say goes. She took one last photo, this time of Michael himself, which felt invasive and deliberate. Consider this your only warning. Next time, you won't get off so easy. She turned on her heel and marched back to her SUV, engine still running, and drove off without another word. The family who'd pulled up looked uncomfortable now, and they left after buying just one small item. Michael stood there feeling like he'd been hit by a storm he hadn't seen coming. He'd dealt with difficult people before, of course. Everyone had. But something about Patricia's attitude, her immediate hostility, and the way she'd spoken to him felt wrong. Really wrong. He pulled out his phone and checked the HOA bylaws again, reading through every section about garage sales. He wasn't crazy. The rules said exactly what he thought they said. 2 sales per year, weekends only, cleanup same day. He was following every guideline. The rest of the afternoon felt different. Michael kept the sale going, but his mind was elsewhere. A few more neighbors stopped by, and they were all friendly enough, though one woman mentioned she'd heard something about HOA stuff and hoped he wasn't having problems. Word traveled fast, apparently. By 4 o'clock, Michael had packed up everything, cleaned his driveway thoroughly, and made about $300 total. Not bad for a Saturday's work, but as he closed his garage door, he couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't over. Not even close. Patricia had promised him documentation by Monday, and something told him she wasn't the type to make empty threats. He went inside, made himself dinner, and tried to forget about the whole thing. It was just a garage sale. How much trouble could one garage sale possibly cause? But deep in his gut, he already knew the answer. With someone like Patricia in charge, apparently quite a lot. Monday morning came too fast. Michael was at his desk working from home when the doorbell rang around 10:30. He opened the door to find a postal worker holding a clipboard and a thick envelope that required his signature. Certified mail. His stomach dropped even before he opened it. Inside was a formal letter on HOA letterhead, and the number at the top made his blood run cold. $500. A $500 fine for his garage sale. He read through the letter twice, then a third time, because he couldn't believe what he was seeing. According to Patricia's document, he was being fined for unauthorized commercial activity, creating a public disturbance, blocking neighborhood traffic flow, and selling prohibited items without proper documentation. The letter was 3 pages long, written in the kind of formal language that was clearly meant to intimidate. Each violation had its own section with references to various HOA codes and subsections. But here's what really got him. None of it was true. Not a single word. He hadn't blocked any traffic. There had been maybe 6 or 7 cars total over 5 hours, all parked perfectly legal on the public street. Public disturbance? He'd been quieter than the guy 4 houses down who mowed his lawn every Saturday at 8 in the morning. And prohibited items? He'd sold household goods, furniture, and books. Normal garage sale stuff that people sold every single day across the country. Michael walked over to his laptop and pulled up the security camera footage. He'd installed cameras when he first moved in. Nothing fancy, just basic home security. The driveway camera had recorded everything. He watched the whole day and fast forward. There was his peaceful garage sale. There were the friendly neighbors browsing. There was Patricia showing up and taking her aggressive photos. Not once did he see any traffic problems, any noise issues, or anything remotely resembling the violations she'd described. He was drafting a response email when his phone buzzed. It was a text from Bill, the neighbor who'd bought the lamp on Saturday. "Hey, got a weird email from the HOA about your garage sale. Just wanted you to know I think it's ridiculous. Let me know if you need a witness or anything." Michael's fingers paused over his keyboard. Email from the HOA? He opened his email and there it was, sent late Sunday night to what looked like the entire neighborhood mailing list. The subject line read, "Community Standards Violation, Immediate Attention Required." His heart sank as he read through it. Patricia had written a long message to everyone in the neighborhood. painting him as some kind of troublemaker who had disregarded community rules, showed disrespect for HOA authority, and created an unsafe and unsightly situation. She'd included several photos, but Michael noticed something immediately. The angles were deceptive. She'd taken a photo of his driveway from a weird angle that made it look more cluttered than it was. She'd photographed the one moment when two cars happened to be on the street at the same time, making it look like a traffic jam. She'd even included a photo of a plastic bag that had blown into his yard, as if that was somehow evidence of him trashing the neighborhood. The email ended with a stern reminder that all residents must follow established procedures and respect board authority, and mentioned that appropriate penalties have been assessed. It was basically a public shaming, sent to hundreds of people who barely knew him. Michael sat back in his chair and took a deep breath. He could feel anger rising in his chest, but he forced himself to stay calm. Getting emotional wouldn't help. He needed to handle this the right way. He spent the next 2 hours putting together a professional response. He attached video clips from his security camera showing the actual garage sale. He quoted the exact HOA bylaws that permitted his sale. He provided timestamps proving there was no traffic disruption, no excessive noise, and no prohibited items. He was calm, factual, and thorough. He ended by formally requesting a hearing to dispute the fine and ask that the accusations be corrected in a community-wide email since they'd been spread community-wide in the first place. He sent it to Patricia and copied the entire HOA board. Then he waited. The response came back in less than an hour. Michael almost admired how fast she'd replied. Almost. Patricia's email was short and dismissive. Mr. Chen, the board has reviewed your violation and the penalty stands. Your video footage is irrelevant as I personally witnessed the violations in question. The HOA president's first-hand account carries more weight than edited video. If you wish to dispute this, you may submit a formal appeal along with the required $50 appeal processing fee. However, I suggest you simply pay the fine and take this as a learning experience about how our community operates. Continued resistance to board authority will not be taken lightly. Michael read it again. Edited video? His security camera footage was time-stamped and continuous. There was nothing edited about it. And now she wanted $50 just to file an appeal? He checked the bylaws again. There was no mention of any appeal processing fee anywhere. He took a screenshot of the bylaw section and sent another email pointing this out, along with a clear statement that his footage was unedited security camera video with verifiable timestamps. He kept his tone professional but firm. He had rights as a homeowner, and he wasn't going to be bullied into paying for violations he didn't commit. This time, Patricia's response took 3 hours, and when it came, Michael actually laughed out loud in disbelief. She'd added another $250 fine for frivolous appeals and wasting board resources. According to her new email, his continued harassment of the board president and refusal to accept responsibility constituted additional violations. So now he was looking at $750 total because he'd had a garage sale and dared to defend himself. This was insane. Michael stood up and walked to his kitchen, poured himself a glass of water, and stared out the window at his quiet street. Over the next few hours, 3 more neighbors texted or called him. 2 of them had been on the receiving end of Patricia's tactics before. One had paid a $200 fine for leaving his trash cans out 4 hours too long. Another had been fined for a lawn decoration that Patricia claimed violated color restrictions, even though those restrictions didn't exist in the actual bylaws. That evening, Michael was getting his mail when he ran into his next-door neighbor, a woman named Rita who he'd only met once before. She gave him a sympathetic look. "I saw the email," she said quietly, glancing around like she was worried someone might hear. "Just so you know, Patricia does this to people, especially new residents. She did it to us when we first moved in. Most people just pay the fines because fighting her is exhausting." "How is she getting away with this?" Michael asked. Rita shrugged helplessly. "The board backs her up. They're mostly her friends or people who are scared of her. And honestly, most residents don't want the drama. It's easier to just stay under her radar and pay up when she comes after you. I know it's not fair, but that's how it is." Michael thanked her for the information and went back inside. He sat at his desk and looked at the emails, the fine notices, and his security footage. Something needed to change. This wasn't just about him anymore. This was about a system that was broken and a person abusing power because nobody had stopped her. He opened his laptop and started doing something he should have done earlier. Research. Deep research. He began reading through every HOA document he could find, every board meeting minute, every financial report. If Patricia wanted to play games, he'd learn the rules of the game. All of them. By midnight, Michael had filled a notebook with information. And he was starting to see patterns that made him very, very interested in what else Patricia might be hiding. The emergency HOA board meeting was scheduled for Thursday evening at 7. Michael received the official notice on Tuesday, and the tone of it made his jaw clench. According to the letter, this special meeting had been called to address serious violations and determine appropriate actions regarding a resident who has demonstrated repeated disregard for community standards. They were talking about him like he was some kind of criminal. Over a garage sale, Michael showed up 15 minutes early to the community clubhouse. It was a small building near the neighborhood entrance, usually used for birthday parties and book clubs. Tonight, though, it felt different. Hostile. About 20 residents were already there, sitting in folding chairs arranged in rows facing a table where the board would sit. Michael recognized a few faces, including Bill and Rita. Some people nodded at him. Others looked away. Patricia arrived exactly at 7, flanked by 4 other board members. She was dressed like she was going to a business conference, carrying a leather folder and a laptop. The other board members looked less prepared, more like regular people who'd been pulled into something they didn't fully understand. They took their seats at the front table, and Patricia stood at a podium that had been set up to the side. "Good evening, everyone," Patricia began, her voice echoing slightly in the room. "Thank you for attending this emergency session. As you all know from my email, we have a serious matter to address tonight concerning violations that threaten the very fabric of our community." Michael sat quietly in the third row, his own laptop bag at his feet. He'd brought everything he needed, all his evidence organized and ready. But he wanted to hear what Patricia had to say first. Patricia clicked her laptop and a projector screen behind her lit up. She'd made a whole presentation. The first slide showed Michael's address in big letters, along with the date of his garage sale. The second slide was titled "Violations Documented" in bold red text. "As your HOA president, it is my duty to maintain the standards that make Meadowbrook a desirable place to live," Patricia continued. She clicked to the next slide, which showed one of her photos from Saturday. It was the angle that made his driveway look cluttered, taken from the street with a zoom lens that distorted the perspective. On Saturday, October 19th, this resident conducted an unauthorized commercial operation that created safety hazards, traffic problems, and visual blight in our community. Click. Another photo, this one showing 2 cars on the street. Traffic congestion that blocked emergency vehicle access. That was a lie. The cars were legally parked with plenty of room for any vehicle to pass. Click. A photo of some items on his table, taken so close that they filled the frame and looked like a pile of junk. Unsightly merchandise displayed in violation of aesthetic standards. Patricia went on like this for 10 minutes, her voice getting more dramatic with each slide. She made it sound like he'd been running a flea market in a war zone. The board members were nodding along, looking serious and concerned. A few residents in the audience were nodding too, especially those sitting near the front who seemed to be Patricia's friends. "The fines assessed are not punitive," Patricia said, her tone softening as if she was being reasonable. "They are educational. They help residents understand that our rules exist for everyone's benefit. When one person decides rules don't apply to them, it creates chaos." She looked directly at Michael. "And chaos destroys property values." She clicked to her final slide, which showed the total fines in huge numbers. $750. "The board has reviewed this matter thoroughly, and we believe these penalties are not only justified but necessary to maintain order. However, since this resident has requested a hearing, we will now allow him 5 minutes to speak." 5 minutes. After her 10-minute presentation, Michael stood up and walked to the front of the room, pulling his laptop from his bag. Several residents shifted in their seats, curious. "Thank you for the time," Michael said calmly. He plugged his laptop into the projector, and Patricia's expression immediately tightened. "I'd like to show everyone what actually happened on Saturday." He started the security camera footage, and the room went quiet. The video played in fast forward, showing his peaceful setup, the few friendly neighbors who stopped by, the empty street, the calm atmosphere. He slowed it down when Patricia's SUV appeared, showing her aggressive approach, her intrusive photography, her confrontational attitude. Then he showed the rest of the day. No traffic jams, no chaos, just a normal garage sale that ended with him cleaning everything up. This is unedited security footage with timestamps, Michael explained. As you can see, there were no traffic problems, no disturbances, and nothing that violated any actual HOA rules. He pulled up the bylaws on screen, highlighting the section about garage sales. According to Section 4.3 of our community bylaws, residents are permitted 2 garage sales per year on weekends with same-day cleanup. I followed every requirement. Patricia stood up abruptly. That footage is irrelevant. I was physically present and witnessed violations that your camera angles don't show. What violations specifically? Michael asked, keeping his voice level. Can you point to the exact bylaw I violated with the exact clause number? Patricia's face flushed. I don't need to explain HOA procedures to you. The board president has discretionary authority to interpret standards and assess violations. That's how HOAs function. But that's not what the bylaws say, Michael replied. He pulled up another section on the screen. Section 2.1 states that fines can only be assessed for specific, documented violations of written rules. Not interpretations, not discretionary decisions. Written rules. Are you questioning my authority? Patricia's voice rose. Some of the board members looked uncomfortable now. I'm asking you to show me which written rule I broke, Michael said simply. The room was completely silent. Patricia opened her mouth, closed it, then opened it again. You blocked traffic. You created an eyesore. You operated a commercial business from your home. The footage shows no blocked traffic. A garage sale isn't a commercial business under any legal definition, and eyesore isn't defined anywhere in our bylaws as a violation. Michael looked at the board members. I'd like to formally request that you vote to dismiss these fines as they're based on violations that don't exist in our actual rules. Patricia slammed her hand on the table. The board will do no such thing. This resident has shown nothing but disrespect and defiance since he moved here. He argues with every decision, questions every authority, and wastes board resources with frivolous complaints. Her professional composure was cracking. We need to send a message that this behavior will not be tolerated in our community. What behavior? A voice called from the audience. Everyone turned. It was Tom, a guy Michael had seen around the neighborhood but never really talked to. Tom stood up, looking nervous but determined. Having a garage sale? Because I've had 3 garage sales in the 5 years I've lived here and nobody ever said anything to me. That's different, Patricia snapped. How is it different? Tom asked. Or are you saying rules apply differently to different people? Rita stood up too. Patricia, you fined me $200 because you said my garden gnome violated color restrictions. But there are no color restrictions for lawn decorations in the bylaws. I paid it because I didn't want trouble, but that doesn't make it right. A few other people started murmuring. Patricia's face was turning red. This meeting is about Mr. Chen's violations, not past board decisions that have already been resolved. But it's the same pattern, Tom said. You fine people for stuff that isn't actually in the rules, then intimidate them into paying. That's slander. Patricia turned to the other board members. I move that we vote immediately on Mr. Chen's fines and end this circus. All in favor of upholding the penalties? The board members looked at each other, clearly uncertain. One woman raised her hand hesitantly, then another. Then the other 2 followed, though they didn't look happy about it. 4-0. Motion carries, Patricia announced triumphantly. The fines stand. Mr. Chen, you have 30 days to pay or we will proceed with property liens. This meeting is adjourned. People started talking all at once, but Patricia was already packing up her laptop. The other board members looked relieved to escape, filing out quickly. Michael stood there collecting his things, feeling the frustration settle in his chest. He'd presented clear evidence, and they'd voted against him anyway. Bill walked over and clapped him on the shoulder. That took guts, man. Most people wouldn't have even tried. Fat lot of good it did, Michael muttered. Maybe not yet, Bill said quietly. But you got people thinking. That's something. Rita approached with Tom beside her. There are more of us who've been on the wrong end of her decisions, Rita said. We should talk. Compare notes, Tom nodded. I know at least 4 other families with similar stories. If we all came forward together, Michael looked at them, then at the other residents still milling around, talking in small groups. Patricia had won tonight's battle. She'd stacked the deck and pushed through her decision, but something had shifted in the room. People were questioning things now, sharing stories, getting angry. "Yeah," Michael said slowly. "Let's talk. All of us." He gathered his laptop and walked out into the parking lot. The fines still stood. Patricia was still in power. But for the first time since this whole mess started, Michael didn't feel like he was fighting alone. And that changed everything. The morning after the board meeting, Michael's phone started ringing before he even finished his coffee. The first call came from a woman named Linda, who lived on the other side of the neighborhood. He'd never met her before. "I heard what happened at the meeting last night," she said, her voice shaking slightly. "I wasn't there, but Tom told me about it. I need to tell you what she did to us." Over the next hour, Linda explained how Patricia had fined her family $1,500 over the course of 2 years. It started with a complaint about their mailbox being the wrong shade of black. Then their front door wreath was deemed too large. Then their daughter's birthday decoration stayed up one day past the acceptable time frame that Patricia had apparently decided on, even though no such time frame existed in any official document. Each time they'd paid the fines because Patricia threatened to put liens on their house, and they couldn't afford a legal battle. "We've paid almost as much in bogus fines as we pay in actual HOA dues," Linda said bitterly. "But what can we do? She runs everything. The board just rubber stamps whatever she wants." Before Michael could fully process Linda's story, another call came in, then another. By lunchtime, he'd heard from 7 different families, and every story made his blood boil a little hotter. There was Kevin, who'd been fined $300 because his teenage son's car was supposedly parked improperly in their own driveway. The car was perfectly within the lines, but Patricia claimed it was at a non-aesthetic angle. There was Jennifer, who'd planted roses in her front yard and received a $200 fine for unauthorized landscaping changes, even though the bylaws specifically allowed residents to maintain their own gardens. There was the Martinez family, who'd been fined repeatedly for their children's toys being visible in the yard, despite the rules saying nothing about toys. But the story that really got to Michael came from Tom, who called him around 2 in the afternoon. Tom had mentioned at the meeting that he knew other families with problems, but Michael wasn't prepared for what he was about to hear. "There's this elderly couple, the Johnsons, who live 3 streets over from you," Tom said. "They're in their late 70s, been here for 20 years. Last year, Patricia decided their house color wasn't up to standard. Said it looked faded and violated aesthetic guidelines." "Let me guess," Michael said. "The bylaws don't actually specify house color standards?" "Exactly. But she bullied them into repainting the entire house. Cost them $8,000. They used their savings to do it, picked a color from the approved list that Patricia showed them." Tom paused, and Michael could hear the anger in his voice. 2 months after they finished painting, Patricia sent them another violation notice. Said the color wasn't what she'd approved, that they'd done it wrong and they needed to repaint again. "You're kidding." "I wish I was." They repainted. Another $7,000. Mrs. Johnson told my wife she cried for a week because they'd wiped out their emergency fund. And you want to know the worst part? I compared photos. The color barely changed. Patricia just wanted to squeeze more money out of them. Michael sat down heavily in his chair. This wasn't just someone on a power trip. This was systematic abuse of elderly people, families, anyone who couldn't or wouldn't fight back. "How is she getting away with this?" he asked, though he already knew the answer. "Because most people are scared, exhausted, or both," Tom said. "And the ones who try to fight back get buried in more fines and threats until they give up. You're the first person I've seen actually stand up to her in a meeting with evidence. That's why people are calling you." After Tom hung up, Michael spent the rest of the afternoon creating a spreadsheet. He logged every story he'd heard, every fine, every violation claim, every timeline. He asked people to send him documentation, copies of violation letters, photos, anything they had. Some people had kept everything. Others had thrown it all away, trying to forget about it. Patterns started emerging. Patricia targeted certain types of people more than others. New residents got hit hard in their first year, like she was establishing dominance. Elderly residents got targeted with expensive repairs. Families with kids got nickel and dimed with small fines that added up, and anyone who questioned her even once got put on a list and watched constantly for any tiny infraction. Michael also noticed something interesting in the financial records. The HOA dues everyone paid were supposed to cover maintenance, landscaping, and community improvements. But when he compared the official budget to the actual expenses people reported, things didn't add up. Money was going somewhere it shouldn't be. On Saturday morning, Michael was checking his mail when another certified letter arrived. His stomach sank. What now? This one was even worse than the first. Patricia was threatening to file a lien against his property if he didn't pay the $750 within 2 weeks. But there was more. She'd also filed a formal complaint with the county zoning office, claiming he was operating an illegal business from his home and conducting unauthorized commercial activities. The letter included a copy of her complaint to the county, full of lies about regular commercial traffic, business signage, and repeated sales events. Unbelievable, Michael muttered, reading through it again. She really has it out for you, doesn't she? Michael looked up. Patricia was standing at her own mailbox 3 houses down, watching him with a cold smile. He hadn't even noticed her there. She walked over slowly, deliberately, carrying her own mail. Everything about her posture screamed superiority. "I tried to warn you," she said. "I tried to give you a chance to learn how things work here. But you just couldn't help yourself, could you?" "I had a garage sale," Michael said flatly. "That's it? One garage sale that followed every rule." Patricia laughed, actually laughed. "Rules are whatever I say they are. That's how this works. I've been doing this for 8 years and nobody has ever successfully challenged me. Not one person." She stepped closer, lowering her voice. "You want to know why? Because important people know how to handle problems in their community. We don't let troublemakers disrupt what we've built. We deal with them. By lying to county officials?" Michael asked. "By harassing elderly couples into spending their life savings on unnecessary repairs? By making up fines for violations that don't exist?" Something flickered in Patricia's eyes. Surprise maybe that he knew about the Johnsons. But she recovered quickly. "Careful with those accusations, Mr. Chen. Slander is a serious legal issue. You wouldn't want to add legal fees to your growing list of financial obligations. And you wouldn't want anyone looking too closely at where HOA funds have been going." Michael replied quietly. Patricia's smile vanished. For just a second, he saw real concern cross her face. Then the mask came back up. "You have 2 weeks to pay your fines. After that, I'll take your house." She turned to leave, then paused. "You know, you'd be much happier somewhere else, somewhere that suits people like you better. Maybe you should consider moving before things get really unpleasant." She walked back to her house and Michael stood there holding the letter, his mind racing. That reaction when he mentioned HOA funds, the flash of worry. He was on to something. He went back inside and pulled up every financial document he could access through the HOA member portal. Budgets, expense reports, meeting minutes about fund allocation. He cross-referenced everything with the stories people had told him about what improvements were supposed to happen versus what actually got done. The landscaping company that supposedly charged $10,000 a month but only showed up twice a month. The pool maintenance that cost triple the normal rate. The emergency repairs that board members had approved but residents never saw happen. And the fines? Hundreds of fines collected over years, all deposited into accounts that weren't clearly documented. By Sunday evening, Michael had filled 2 notebooks with information. The picture was becoming clear. Patricia wasn't just power-hungry. She was stealing from the HOA, using fake vendors, inflated costs, and excessive fines to funnel money somewhere it didn't belong. The bogus fines weren't just about control. They were about profit. Michael leaned back in his chair and stared at his notes. This was bigger than his garage sale. Bigger than any individual fine. This was fraud, harassment, and abuse of power on a scale that had been going on for years. His phone rang. It was Rita. "Hey, I know it's late," she said, "but I was going through my old files and I found something. Patricia made me hire a specific contractor for a deck repair she said was mandatory. Cost me $4,000. But I just looked up the contractor online. The business license expired 3 years ago and the address is Patricia's P.O. box." Michael sat up straight. "Can you send me everything you have on that?" "Already did." "Check your email." Rita paused. "Michael, what are you going to do?" He looked at his notebooks, his evidence, his growing file of Patricia's misdeeds. "Something that should have been done years ago," he said. "I'm going to stop her." Michael spent Monday morning on the phone with lawyers, accountants, and public records offices. By afternoon, he had everything he needed. Tuesday morning, he filed a formal request for a full community membership meeting, citing Section 7 of the HOA bylaws that allowed any member to call such a meeting with proper notice. Patricia tried to block it immediately. She sent an email saying his request was procedurally improper and unnecessary disruption. But Michael knew the bylaws better than she did now. He'd spent weeks reading every word, every clause, every subsection. She couldn't legally stop a properly filed membership meeting, and she knew it. The meeting was set for Saturday at 2 p.m. at the community clubhouse. The entire neighborhood received notice. Michael kept the agenda vague, just listing community concerns and HOA governance as the topic. He wanted everyone there, but he didn't want Patricia to know exactly what was coming. Saturday arrived with clear skies. Michael got to the clubhouse an hour early to set up. Tom, Rita, and Bill helped him arrange chairs. They'd expected maybe 50 people. By 1:30, over 100 residents had packed into the room and were standing along the walls. The energy was tense, expectant. Patricia arrived at 1:55, dressed in an expensive pantsuit and carrying her ever-present leather folder. Her 4 board members trailed behind her, looking uncomfortable. When Patricia saw the crowd, something flickered across her face. Uncertainty, maybe, but she composed herself quickly and took her seat at the front table. "I'm not sure what Mr. Chen thinks this meeting will accomplish," Patricia announced to the room before anyone else could speak. "But I want everyone to know that the board has already addressed his violations through proper channels. This is simply another attempt to waste community resources and—" "Actually," Michael said, standing up from his seat in the front row, "this meeting isn't about my garage sale." Well, not entirely. He walked to the front of the room, carrying his laptop and a large folder of documents. "This is about 8 years of violations, not by residents. By you." The room went dead silent. Patricia's face hardened. "How dare you?" "Please let me finish," Michael said calmly. He plugged his laptop into the projector. "I know everyone here is busy, so I'll try to make this quick, but there are some things you all need to see." He clicked to his first slide. It showed a simple title: Documentation of HOA Board Misconduct and Financial Fraud. Patricia stood up abruptly. "This is slander. I will not sit here and be—" "Sit down, Patricia," said one of the board members, a man named George. His voice was quiet but firm. "Let him talk. I want to hear this." Patricia looked stunned. George had always backed her up before, but now he was staring at Michael with intense interest, along with the other 3 board members. Slowly, Patricia sat back down. Michael advanced to the next slide, which showed a timeline. "Over the past 2 weeks, I've been contacted by 43 families in this neighborhood. 43. Of them have been fined by Patricia for violations that either don't exist in our bylaws or were completely fabricated." He clicked through slides showing examples. The Johnsons' double house painting. Kevin's car that was supposedly parked wrong. Jennifer's roses. The Martinez children's toys. "That's just administration of rules," Patricia interrupted. "Every HOA president has discretionary authority. Section 2.1 of our bylaws says otherwise," Michael replied. "Fines can only be assessed for specific written violations, not interpretations, not aesthetic judgments, written rules only." He showed the bylaw on screen, but it gets worse than misapplied fines. The next slide showed financial documents. "Our HOA collects approximately $200,000 annually in dues from all residents. Those funds are supposed to pay for landscaping, pool maintenance, common area upkeep, and insurance. But when I compared our actual expenses to industry standards and what other similar communities pay, something was very wrong." He clicked through a series of comparisons. "Our landscaping company supposedly charges $10,000 a month. The average for a community our size is $4,000. Our pool maintenance is triple the normal rate. And we've paid over $60,000 in the past 3 years for emergency repairs that, according to county records, never actually happened." Murmuring started spreading through the crowd. The board members were leaning forward now, looking at the projector with growing alarm. "I contacted several of these vendors directly," Michael continued. "Some of them don't exist anymore. Some never had contracts with our HOA, and some have addresses that trace back to post office boxes registered to Patricia Hendricks." Patricia's face had gone pale. "This is absurd. You can't prove any of—" "Actually, I can." Michael held up a thick folder. I have bank records, business registrations, email correspondences, and statements from vendors. I also have testimony from Rita, who can prove that Patricia forced her to hire a contractor whose business license was expired and whose business address is Patricia's own P.O. box. Rita stood up from her seat. It's true, I have all the receipts and canceled checks. I paid $4,000 to a company that doesn't legally exist. Patricia's hands were gripping the table edge so hard her knuckles were white. You have no right to access private HOA financial records. They're not private, Michael said. They're membership records that any homeowner can request, which I did properly and legally 2 weeks ago, and you approved the request yourself. He showed an email from Patricia approving his records request. She'd probably assumed he was just looking for something about his garage sale. Fine. George, the board member, spoke up. Patricia, is any of this true? Have you been inflating costs and using fake vendors? Of course not. This is a witch hunt orchestrated by someone who can't accept authority. Patricia's voice was rising. He violated rules, got fined, and now he's trying to destroy me with lies and... I'm not done, Michael said quietly. The room fell silent again. He looked at Patricia directly. You made a point of telling me that important people know how to handle problems, that you deal with troublemakers. Well, here's the thing, Patricia. I am one of those important people. He advanced to a new slide. It showed his professional credentials, his law degree, his bar association membership, and his job title. My name is Michael Chen, and I'm a civil rights attorney specializing in HOA abuse and housing discrimination cases. I moved here 3 months ago after accepting a position with the State Attorney General's office, heading up their new HOA oversight division. The room erupted. People were talking over each other, some gasping, some laughing in disbelief. Patricia looked like she'd been hit by a truck. I didn't plan to investigate this HOA. Michael continued over the noise. I was just going to live here quietly and do my job elsewhere. But then you targeted me, Patricia. And in doing so, you showed me a pattern of abuse that's been going on for years. Discrimination, harassment, fraud, embezzlement, and intimidation. He pulled out another document. This morning, I filed a formal complaint with the State Attorney General's office and the County District Attorney. I've also prepared civil cases for any resident who wants to sue for their fraudulent fines, and I'm offering pro bono representation to everyone affected. Patricia finally found her voice, though it came out shaky. You can't do this. You're just one person. You have no authority to... Actually, a woman's voice called from the back of the room. Everyone turned. A professional-looking woman in a blazer was standing by the door. He has quite a bit of authority. I'm Assistant District Attorney Helen Rodriguez, and I'm here to inform you, Ms. Hendricks, that our office is opening a formal investigation into allegations of fraud and embezzlement. We'll need you to come in for questioning next week. Patricia's face crumbled. The mask she'd worn for 8 years completely shattered. This isn't. I was just... Everything I did was for the community. George stood up. I move that we immediately suspend Patricia Hendricks from her position as HOA president pending investigation. All in favor? The other 3 board members' hands shot up instantly. Motion carries, George said. Patricia, you're removed from your position effective immediately. For a long moment, Patricia just sat there, staring at nothing. Then she grabbed her folder and her purse and walked out of the clubhouse without another word. The door swinging shut behind her was the only sound in the silent room. Then everyone started talking at once. Questions flew at Michael from every direction. How do they get their money back? What happens now? Can they really sue? Michael held up his hands. One thing at a time. First, the criminal investigation will handle the fraud charges. Second, I'm setting up free consultations for anyone who wants to pursue reimbursement for bogus fines. Third, and most importantly, this community needs new leadership and new rules to make sure this never happens again. Over the next hour, Michael helped the community start to heal. The board elected George as temporary president. They voted to refund Michael's fines immediately and to review every fine Patricia had assessed in the past 3 years. They established new oversight procedures, term limits for board positions, and required multiple board members to approve any fine over $100. Bill approached Michael as people were leaving. You could have told us who you were from the start. Would have saved yourself a lot of trouble. Michael shook his head. I needed to experience what everyone else experienced. See how she operated. Document everything properly. If I'd revealed myself immediately, she would have just been more careful. Now we have everything we need to make sure she faces real consequences. 3 months later, Michael was having coffee on his front porch when Rita walked by with her dog. Have you heard? She called out. Patricia's being formally charged. Fraud, embezzlement, the whole thing. They found over $300,000 she'd stolen over the years. Michael nodded. He'd heard. He'd also heard that 12 families had successfully sued for reimbursement and that the Johnsons had gotten back most of their money for those unnecessary house paintings. The neighborhood felt different now. Lighter. People actually talked to each other, helped each other without fear of some petty fine. Last weekend, 3 different families had garage sales, and nobody said a word. Michael's phone buzzed with a text from the new HOA board. They wanted his input on proposed new bylaws. He smiled, typed a response, and went back to enjoying his coffee. Sometimes justice takes time. Sometimes it takes patience. And sometimes it just takes one person willing to stand up and say enough is enough.